at the University of Cumberland currently. He graduated from Northern Illinois University with a major in psychology and a minor in Spanish. He holds 2 master's degrees, one in school counseling and Latin American literature, both from Northeastern University in Illinois. He is certified as a national certified counselor, a national school counselor, and he's been granted a National Minority Fellowship by the National Board of Certified Counselors. Currently, Gerardo works as a full-time professional counselor at a high school level and has a private practice as a licensed clinical professional counselor in the state of Nevada. Previously, he has worked as an English and second language teacher and as a Spanish literature teacher and as a mental health professional and clinical case manager. Gerardo's passion evolves around the mental health challenges that minority groups face in our society and ultimately in his community. And he has worked with Latinos, African Americans, and the LGBTQ members. Furthermore, he has extensive experience working with exceptional learners in school settings. His clinical practice embraces contemporary counseling approaches, including neurolinguistics, hypnosis, family constellation, mindfulness, cognitive and other philosophical existential gestalt approaches. Welcome, Gerardo.
Thank you, Oscar. It's very exciting to be with all of you this afternoon. It's a extraneous experience because I can't see anyone. So it's a webinar modality, I will assume.
Yeah, it's in a webinar. We can't see your video though, Gerardo. I only see.
You cannot see my video?
No, there. Nope.
Oh, much better.
There we are. Okay, welcome. So we've got about 48 attendees, and these are all human services students. So they're in one of our human services courses this semester. Most of them are majors, but not all. And I'll go ahead and, did you have a presentation to?
Yes, I did.
Let me see if I can, I'll make you the host, and now you have control over the session.
Thank you. So once again, guys, I'm very excited to be with all of you today here. Part of my passion is falls into the idea of engaging in a post-contemporary approaches in counseling. As Oscar mentioned, it including philosophical approaches and neurolinguistics. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this approach or not, but today we are going to review what is neurolinguistics about and what are some of the techniques that are contained in this approach, and more precisely what it is, what is NLP or neurolinguistics. So to start with, neurolinguistic programming, it's actually a framework, not merely a theory, as made the cognitive or behavioral or existentialist approach or theories that exist in our counseling field or in psychotherapy or in psychology, as a matter of fact. It is a collection, actually, of premises that comes from those theories that provides the foundation to this approach to support our clientele or our patients when we are working with them in a healing process. So neurolinguistics is it's composed by different, like I said, premises, but more likely than anything, it includes the behavior, the linguistics, and of course the programming part. And we will be talking about the programming part that it's essential to this approach in counseling. So when we talk about neuro, you probably are thinking about the mind and how the brain is wired completely, and how our neurons connect to each other and extend to our entire body. Precisely, that's what it is. And I guess in an advanced modality, we would have been talking about how that actually changed the neural connection and paths in our brains, how neurolinguistics actually affects that and supports connections at that level. But for the for tonight's session, I would like to focus into the cognitive process that takes place at the neural connection level. So we are talking about the prefrontal cortex of the brain, along with other axes of our brain, such as the limbic system. So we will talk about that in a little bit, but we also incorporate linguistics. And the part of linguistics in this approach emphasize the idea that verbal and non-verbal communication are actually ways of inputting information into our brains and then coding and remembering that information and storage in it is part of the linguistic process that occurs in our daily lives. So we will discuss that in a little bit more. And then the programming part. So if I can give a summary of what it is, I will say the NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming, is how we use the language of the mind to constantly achieve a specific and desired outcomes. I think the key part of this is the desired outcome. You will notice in a little bit that this specific approach emphasizes the need to always look for what we want, rather than focusing on what we don't want. So more than likely, when you work with clients, they will come to you and say, I don't want to feel sad anymore. I don't want to be feeling anxious anymore. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want that relationship. Neurolinguistics, and this is where the linguistic part comes in this small example, kicks in, and we as the providers begin emphasizing or working with the client in facilitating a changing process through the wording, because we will invite the client actually to work on what they want instead of what they don't want anymore. So instead of now wanting that toxic relationship, we will ask the client, what would you like instead? What would you like? Well, I want a loving relationship, a positive relationship where communication exists. Well, those are now positive stated goals. So programming, the part of programming is actually that, it's stated in a positive way, the goals and outcomes that you are looking into finding. So neurolinguistics incorporates different techniques that are founded theoretically in other well-known theories. So the theoretical framework that NLP utilizes are based on the cognitive, the behavioral, the existentialist, the family, the neurobiology, the linguistic field, and the communication. All of them are part actually of theories that already exist. So I'm gonna walk us through the elements that each of those theories provides to the neurolinguistic approach to support the healing of individuals, and so that you can have a better idea that rather than being a theory, neurolinguistic is a framework, meaning we have the basis and the essential pillars of the NLP from other well-established theories already. So when we think about cognition, and I don't know if you guys remember from your psychology class or not, when we think about cognition, we go all the way to how do we learn? How do we form concepts in our minds? How do we embrace or begin formulating categories? This goes all the way back to Piaget. You probably remember Piaget, how individuals create schemas, right? And how do we actually formulate ideas in our head? How do we formulate categories? Piaget is a pioneer on that. Furthermore, in the cognition or the cognitive theory in psychology, the learning, it's also included there. how do we learn? How do we actually conceptualize what words are in my long-term memory? How can I actually subtract from my long-term memory, or to retrieve rather what I know in order to make it a present nowadays? So all of that is contained into the techniques that we will see in the framework of NLP. We will see that in a minute. But I wanted to show you guys that NLP is indeed founded into already well-established theories. From the behavioral part, I think about when we start planning with our clients, and in treatment planning, for example, you work with the client and facilitate the process of selecting the goals that they want to reach in therapy. That's behavioral. So the outcomes are also describable with time and intensity. If you think about your objective for therapy, it always includes time and intensity. Instead of feeling depressed 10 times per day, I will feel depressed 2 times per day. How do I get there? That will be a treatment planning, which is behavioral, even merely by writing those down. And you as a clinician writing those goals down, you are indeed practicing a behavioral approach when we are talking about the healing process. I'm going to jump to the other side, communication. Neurolinguistics emphasize the communication that we utilize in our daily life. What do I mean by that? Neurolinguistics looks at how do we actually conceptualize things and how do we use the language in our daily life. Because behind the framework of NLP, there is the assumption that our unconscious mind is constantly working and saving everything that is being said around you. So neurolinguistics looks at what words are you using? How are you perpetuating your own misery, quote unquote, for lack of a better word, and to illuminate the point. If your client is suffering depression, for example, when you approach depression through an NLP framework, you actually work with the client in identifying what words it's an existing in her or his daily life that perpetuate that pain. So, and then we work to identify that, to switch them to other words that are not connected to that depression. I think about a student that may be feeling quote unquote stupid for not understanding mathematics, for example. So you will have clients that will come and tell you, I feel dumb because I don't know that material. So instead of focusing on the dumb part, we will say, perhaps it's not that you're dumb, you just need extra practice and a different approach to better understand that. So it's the lack of skills instead of a fully description of the individual.
Gerardo, can I
Yes.
maybe provide some feedback to make sure I'm understanding what I'm hearing? It sounds like you're saying by changing the way people think and talk about a problem changes the way they think and feel about a problem.
Correct, Oscar. And that's actually how, at the beginning I mentioned, that's the prefrontal lobe in our brain, and the executive decision-making process that happens in our brain. So when you invite an individual actually to think and to begin using different wording, it comes through that prefrontal lobe, the language, the executive part of our brain. Then it gets processed to the limbic system, which is the emotional system in our brain. That's where the amygdala is located, the hippocampus is located. That's where the emotions are processed. So that is why communication, linguistic words that we use, thoughts, processing, are extremely relevant to the neurolinguistic framework that we utilize to work with clients. Of course, it's extremely relevant to the neurotransmitters because and the neuroconnections in our brains, because once we start seeing and having a different perspective of what is happening to us, what you have created is actually a connection in your brain that will allow you to perhaps see things differently.
So,
So
by the process of examining the neurolinguistics and all the parts of the brain that are involved, especially since emotion is very closely identified as being in those brain centers, right, where language occurs.
correct.
Okay, I just to reflect what I'm hearing.
Yes, thank you, and please do interject because things fly out of my um, the process as well. So it also utilized family therapeutic approaches that had been well established, such as the Satir approach. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Satir's approach to family counseling. Satir has a very interesting approach in challenging individuals to really bring up and say what they are feeling so that they can clearly actually tell the partner what is happening. Of course, we don't have enough time to really cover the entire Satir's approach, but we'll see it in a minute how it's located. So as you probably will see, the theoretical framework in NLP is foundational or is founded from other theories already there. So it's not a method, it's not just a technique itself, it's a framework that is based in other theories.
So it sounds like an integrated approach in some ways, where it integrates these different theoretical bodies and folds them together to form kind of a cohesive method. Would that be accurate to say?
Correct. I wouldn't call it method because to me, the framework and method, to me, may be different, but it can be used interchangeable for some people, which is okay. If you want to think about that way, it's fine. I would call it framework, but it would be a method as well if that facilitates the process.
And so, as I'm hearing you explain the basis or the foundations that it draws from, it makes me think about why language and communication have such an emotional impact on it. It's like if you and I are having an argument or you're complimenting me, and I could have a range of very powerful emotions just from that communication interaction. Or if I'm listening to a song and I'm processing, the information, or singing a song, and just how intimately connected language is with our emotional experience. And I think a lot of times we don't recognize it as such. And then we think we don't have control over our thoughts and feelings, but in effect, by using this type of framework, you can kind of unpack how people are creating their own negative worldviews and experiences. Is that right?
That's absolutely how I see it. And based on what you just mentioned, Oscar, NLP based the approximation to to facilitate a change as an integral approach. So you work with the language, you work with the cognitive processes that are happening. In a way, you map those thought processes that are happening in the individual in front of you as a client. You actually plan with them what is it that you want. So you integrate everything simultaneously. And I will go, and that is why it's extremely important for the NLP that individuals that do practice evolve and are advanced in tracking patterns. So tracking what is in front of you, observing the non-verbal cues that your client is giving you, constantly being reflective and present to see what words are being used. I can give you an example of one more in the language. I used to have an individual, someone raised the hand, so I don't know what do I do?
Okay, so let's see.
I think I can't see what's in questions.
Yeah, if you want to, if you have a question, you can go into the chat window and I'll read the questions to Gerardo, if you like.
That would be great. So
I'll be watching that and I'll let you know as it goes. Please continue.
Okay, so the existentialist approach, it goes hand in hand with Carl Jung's, I don't know if any of you have heard about Carl Jung, but he does work with the unconscious mind and all the different types of personalities that are part of what's encoded in our unconscious mind. And for Carl Jung, the unconscious mind is actually a powerful source of energy that for many individuals that are not aware, continue to be present as we live our present time, continues to drive our lives. So through the neuro-linguistic approach, by mapping thoughts, by observing the communication, by tracking those words that are impacted, what we have is an awareness. We begin offering the client awareness or insight, which is quote unquote part of our wellness model in the counseling field. So that's some of the theories that surround NLP. There are others that are out there that is part of it, but for the matter of time and our benefits, those are kind of the most important ones. So another assumption that NLP makes is that this the NLP approach is more interested in the not so much into the narrative of the client. Now, as a professional clinicians and future clinicians, you also need to utilize your critical thinking skills and realize that there are methods are there, approaches, frameworks, and you need to assess whether some of the premises from this approach are applicable or not. I personally believe that the narrative of my clients are extremely important. For the NLP, and I wanted to present this to all of you so that you are clear, the NLP is not so interested in the narrative. So the NLP will immediately jump into let's work on your goals and how to arrive.
Mm-hmm. So they don't take like a psychodynamic
and if
approach.
In the process of working, they don't. They will say that if we perpetuate the narrative that is painful, you are reviving that again. So no point to do that. For me as a clinician, it is extremely important because what I do when someone is narrating, I started actually tracking and mapping what are the beliefs behind that narrative. And we will talk about the beliefs in a minute. So for the sake of our presentation today, NLP focuses on a process, meaning what event took you to be here, right? Not the, and then he say and she say, and then I felt that way. More like that was an accident. That event itself has mobilized the energy of the individual to feel in a particular way. And it's going to be more clear in a minute. And if you are confused, it's perfectly fine to be confused, because that means that we are all activating our minds to be looking for limiting concepts and trying to stretch to something that may not be so clear. But it will be in a minute, I promise you. So the process, the event, right, that momentum, how do you get there? And more importantly, NLP assumes that you are the creator of everything that is happening to you. Nobody is doing anything to you. Nobody has done anything to you. Why is this idea? This is very important in advanced practices of NLP, because when you are in the process of hypnotizing individuals, this idea of you are the source of the challenge also implies that you too are the source of the answers. So we will facilitate the process for you to get to know your very own answers. So as a clinician, the work will be to facilitate the process, departing from the idea that you are the creator of that. And it gets into a more interesting part because as a clinician, then I bring other modalities, Oscar, that has fortify my practice. And then I start actually looking at the family dynamics, what happened to them. And then I bring that as those unconscious processes that are already coded in your mind are alive now in the present time and are driving your life. That is why you are responsible for what is happening to you. Rather than my husband makes me feel angry, we will actually ask, why did you make yourself angry? That question that returns back to the client evokes and provokes a thinking, and that's what we want. Mobilize the energy so the individuals begin seeing a different perspective of the challenge that they are facing.
There's a question here from Crystal. Does this process work well for clients that have a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder?
Crystal, do you say? It does. I utilize it all the time, but I will absolutely caution you that for those processes, you need to learn the advanced techniques, because there are other techniques that get incorporated into this that you need to carry on in order to facilitate the process in a very safe manner. So you don't want to activate memories and just let them floating around. You want to complete the process. Maybe in another symposium, Oscar, I can do that so that everyone can see how it works with PTSD or any other traumas.
Okay, so it can be useful with PTSD, but it requires another level of experience and training.
Absolutely, yeah, because yes, we are going to mobilize the energy of the trauma. So we need to know when do we need to do that. Because the NLP, just a little overview of how it works in trauma, the NLP trusts the individual energy. So that means that you as the clinician, you have the belief, profoundly believe, that your client is strong enough to go through the process, and then you trust it. So to utilize it in trauma, it has to be applied to yourself first. You have to get to know you. You have to get to know your skills, your strengths, your limitations, and embrace them in order to project that into your client. So it does require a little more practice, but it's a beautiful process. Good question. Thank you. So how does it work? What's the process like? What do I do? What is NLP? How does it look like? What can I do? How do I begin practicing it? There are multiple techniques included specifically in NLP. They are not solely from NLP. They come from other theories, but it has been modified by the NLP framework. So in order to begin applying NLP, we need to actually think about the communication model as the NLP sees. So why do we need to learn this? Because if we think about how the way we process language, the way we encode information, the way we comprehend, then we can understand what filters are in my mind and how I see and activate my body. So this will make sense in a minute. So, for NLP, an event is a triggering behavior. That's what has happened to you. That's what you came to me. You can handle what is happening. You don't need to see a therapist, right? In our world, our brain is capable of absorbing information through our 5 senses only. Will everyone agree with that? We only absorb information through that. So you see, you smell, you touch, you taste, and all of them provide you with certain parts of information. But this is the beauty of how our mind works. We absorb information at 2 million bits per second. Oscar, I know you were in the technology field, and so that's a lot of information when you think about the capacity of saving information in our brains. But look at this, guys. It's very interesting. Our brain does not process that much of information. So it has to come up with a beautiful way of sorting just what you want. And this is when we start gaining insight of who we are. So in order to not to burn out and say, stop, I can't handle that much of information, because we are all surrounded by stimuli around us, the noise, everything is actually a stimuli. So in order to facilitate the learning and the information intake in our brain, it does something beautiful. It deletes information, it distorts information, and it generalized information. So we will talk about this in a minute. I don't know if it is triggering anyone, but we'll talk in a minute. Hold it there. So what happened is, once I observe that information from our world, it gets distorted, deleted, or generalized, and it creates a shorter information, chunks. It actually shortens it, and it creates internal representations. As you probably remember, this is very closely related to schemas from Piaget. That's what we formulate in our brain, schemas, categories, in order to shorten that. So what happened after I formulate that? I created a state of being. I will say an emotional response to that. And after I create that in my mind, I actually activate my part of the brain that sends signals to my body to create a physiological response. After I have created a physiological response, what I have is an enactment of behavior. This is the communication model, and we will talk about the deletion, distortion, and generalization, because it's the most beautiful part, at least for me. We will see it in a minute. That's how the communication model works, and it's assumed in the NLP approach. Why? Because if you really think about it, I'm going to give a case as an area. You have an individual that comes in and say, you know, I had a boyfriend, he broke up with me, and now I'm in a depressive mode. Okay, so we will think about the event when that happened. We were having dinner, right? And he just said, I don't want to be your boyfriend anymore. Because we are observing and constantly getting information in, it goes through your filters. And the filters are the deletion, the distortion, and generalizations. It creates an image in your mind. I'm probably not beautiful enough, or I'm not lovable enough. Therefore, I create an emotional state. More likely will be sadness. And that sadness produces a physiological response to it. I don't want to do anything anymore. I'm lethargic. I want to go to bed and cry. That enacts a behavior of, I'm just going to be in my room, don't bother me. I am going to be in solitude by myself. This is just an example. So, filters. Like I said, we get the information, remember? Then my beliefs, my language, my memories, my values, my decisions, my meta programs, and we will talk about meta programs maybe in the next occasion, but all of those internal filters that I have, all the belief I had that I'm not lovable actually gets distorted, deleted, or generalized. So how does it get deleted? Well, he probably didn't mention that I'm actually a lovely person, that it was a matter of him traveling to other country. So I distorted what was coming into my brain, but not because I wanted to, because there are already programs in my mind that filter that information that came to you. So you remember the classical one. If one man is bad, maybe all of them are. That's a generalization process. You can't generalize one event to the others. So if he didn't love me, probably nobody will love me again. So there is a generalization that has been happening, not because you want. This is meta programs that are on your unconscious mind that operates to sort and to delete and to generalize what you think you are getting from the external world. So NLP emphasizes that, because then what we work on is precisely that: beliefs, language, memory, values. And guess what? See how beautiful colors they are? In order to remember that, I call them lens. So get your pink glasses, your red glasses, because that's how you filter information. NLP will allow for you to remove those filters and say, wait, isn't it true that I cannot be lovable? Isn't it really true that if he doesn't love me, no other male will love me? So did I hear that he is actually moving to another country? That's why I'm focusing only in my schema, my image, that I will be alone. How does it look like? Or maybe I will be very alone, and I don't want to feel that way. But it is not being given to you. You have that, and we will learn from where. Could be from your dynamics from your childhood. Could be from the beliefs that you have. Could be in the ways that you learn how to love other people. Could be from the words that you utilize and what love means to you. So NLP comes in and say, wait, let's find out what's happening with those filters of yours. Let's explore your beliefs. What are your beliefs about separation? What are your beliefs about relationships? How do you think you need to be loved? How would you like to be loved? So when we begin providing that path to the client, what is happening is the insight gaining. They begin evolving in their self-awareness. And when they change that awareness to a new neural connections, they can see the event in a different way. They can see life in a different way. They can extend their perspective and limitations to, wait, maybe I really never pay attention to exactly what was happening to me internally. And that has played an important role of how I feel nowadays. So awareness, that's part of what we do in counseling. So you probably remember, we want the individuals to get awareness all the time. Okay, so then we filter the information. So a more clear kind of an infographic: an event happened, goes to your internal filters, previous experiences, family dynamics, childhood experiences, ways that you have learned how to love, ways that you experience being discriminated, rejected, unloved, etc., 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 right? So the clinician that utilizes this method must be extremely attentive to map and track what are those filters. Because what you want to do is to bring them alive to them and say, wait, have you ever thought about this? What makes you think that you are not lovable? Since when do you think this has started? So you help them explore those limitations and internal filters that have been causing them the state, emotional state and physiological response at the end. So, of course, then we create a mental representation of how it looks like. It could be a picture, it could be a word, whatever the schema is in your mind. It creates an emotional state, a physiological response, and a behavior based on that. So because he did not love me, I will never be loved by no one anymore. Therefore, I'm not dating, I'm not interested, I'm completely lethargic towards relationships. So that behavior, when they come to you and say, I want to find the love of my life, well, let's work on it. Right? So just a simple example of how this is being used, or what NLP, neuro-linguistic, can do. So in neurolinguistics, we are, there are more questions.
Okay, let's see. So Amelia is asking to clarify, when using REBT, which is rational emotive behavioral therapy, or CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, a counselor may ask the client to state the consequence of a specific belief after an activating event. Then the counselor will ask the client to question their belief, thus restructure a new belief. Is NLP being used as a framework for which the counselor helps the client explore and question their belief instead of basing their belief off of past experiences? That's the question.
Good question. NLP presupposes that a belief formulates values. So because I believe in a particular way, then I have a particular value towards a particular situation in my life. So what NLP does is allows to face the belief that could stand or stem from experience I would have completely, could have, it's not necessarily from there, and work on it. Because then you start looking into the values that they have, what is important to them.
Another
so yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead.
So yes, CBT and rational emotive therapy are approaches that are similar to this one. I will say that the only thing that gets kind of included into NLP is the unconscious process. There is something more that we cannot see, but is functioning and working for one purpose only: to learn about you, to learn about you as a persona, as an individual.
Okay, there's another question from Crystal, and maybe this will give you a little bit break. It's more of a comment and question. So is it getting down to the truth internally than rather what an individual is getting from the outside of themselves? I think the idea is that it's understanding how the individual changes what they're getting. They're not getting a representation of information coming directly from the outside. They're kind of gets twisted up in our schemas and our beliefs. Is that right?
It is correct. So in reality, the mental representation form comes from you. That's how you interpret it. That's how you encode it, and that's how it's saved in mind.
And
so,
you know, what's really interesting is even as we're talking about this stuff right now, Gerardo is explaining this framework, which is very new to us. We are doing the exact same things he's talking about. If we assume this model is accurate, we are filtering information out, we are distorting it, we are deleting it. And so think about why this is sometimes why learning something can be difficult, because we interfere with our own process. And this is why we check and recheck when people are learning to see if they're actually absorbing the information accurately. Because what they might be doing is inaccurately storing the information.
And just to add to your comment, Oscar, it's very interesting because at times what we do, we fight against what has been given to us. I'm not going to try to replace any of the foundational theories whatsoever. I'm just sharing a new tool in case you get interested in to explore this framework so that you can learn it. It's just another tool in your beautiful toolbox as a clinician that you may find very interesting to use down the road as you continue working in your preparation as future counselors. Indeed, this idea of interference of new information, it's very related to the second language acquisition. As a second language learner, my first language, or L1, interferes constantly with the learning of other languages. So because I'm constantly challenging the syntax, the structure of the new language, etc., etc. So imagine if we can just freely allow that to come in. We will just learn and learn and learn.
Right.
That will be a beautiful process.
But, so what is the adaptive function? I mean, if the bind does this automatically, why? Why does it do this? You know, there must be some underlying function that assists us in this, and also can also get in the way of other things.
And not everything is negative, because if there are particular schemas similar already in your system, what you do, you accept those and you delete the rest and move on. So whatever helps you from whatever you're learning, take it. But be very aware, this is part of our awareness, what you are rejecting, so that you can continue enhancing your abilities to recognize, I'm an active learner. Mm-hmm. I'm an active and I'm present, I'm actively listening, and I'm consciously deciding to eliminate what I want to eliminate. That, for everyone, right. If you can get to the level, you have actually mastered NLP.
So because to juxtapose this against passive learning or passive listening, active listening is to be aware of those filters so you can more accurately process information and decide how you want to evaluate that information.
Correct.
Passively is to say, oh, there goes Gerardo. He's always talking about NLP. I know what he's going to say. I already know what he's going to do. And I reject all this theory and I don't agree with anything he says. So I haven't really listened to you. And I'm sure everyone here on the webinar has probably had an experience where you're having an argument with somebody and you're like, you're not listening to me. You're just hearing your, pre-recorded tape play about when I'm talking.
And this is the beauty of all this, Oscar. Even if you choose to do that, by being aware, it empowers you as an individual. So that's what we want, because that means that you have the power to decide. No longer external stimuli will manage you. You can decide, I want to do this. So
this information kind of wakes you up, and then you can either choose to use it or, kind of go as you were.
Because then you will no longer be a victim.
Right.
You will not have the chance to say, I'm a victim of my external world. So this is what we want to gain for the client, is we need to empower you through self-awareness and through the decision-making process and the idea that you can choose in a way resembling the ACT model and the acceptance and choice theory. I can do it, I want to do it, or I can opt to do it. If I don't, then it's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But what counts is that you are aware. One of the things that I absolutely love in the neurolinguistic models is the idea that projection changes the world into a replica of one's own face, meaning that everything, and this is Carl Jung's, of course, so that means that everything that is happening in my surrounding is caused by me. And this is where it gets a little not complicated, because you have to experience it, but it's an advanced modality, because then we talk about the quantum mechanics and the energy. My energy, my thoughts are so powerful, they can influence individuals, and I can project that constantly. So similar to when something wrong happens to us, this is what we are constantly projecting. But look, our conscious mind is projecting that, not because you are a bad individual, but because there is something to learn about it. You needed to learn that in order to continue moving on. And I don't know if any of you, we have 50 participants. I don't know if any of you have experienced that, gosh, I knew this. Why did I fall for it again? So perhaps you fall for it because you needed it to learn. And when you fall and fall and fall, that means that you are not learning it. So you need to go back and say, what can I do differently then? Can I actually work on that and become a better person in order that when the new situation, the new encounter of the event arrives again, I can face it differently?
So the idea is changing yourself to react differently to the experience rather than to keep repeating the same pattern of behavior that seems like a mistake, but in a broader sense is an active choice. Like, so one example, without blaming the victim, is, let's say I'm a victim of domestic violence and I keep going back to the same relationship, right? And then through that experience, I have to learn what I haven't been able to learn in order to react differently and say, you know, I keep thinking my schema tells me that this is going to work out, or I want it to, but in reality, what this experience has taught me is this pattern will not change. This dynamic will not change unless I react differently. And that might be leaving the relationship, becoming healthier in some way with my self-esteem or something to that effect.
And your example is beautifully expressed, because as the facilitator of this process, utilizing this framework, you help the client to gain insight. Why do I go back? For what purpose?
And so then, and many times clients will say, I don't know, right? But you don't stop there.
You don't. You continue.
You have to dig there, keep digging there, because they do know, but they don't necessarily aren't aware of it. And awareness and consciousness are funny things, because being aware of something doesn't mean it's in the forefront of your mind, but you can shine a light on that understanding and then become aware of it.
And it's excellent what you said, because NLP utilizes intuition. In an advanced modality, the intuition of the individual is enhanced through different exercises and in awareness activities. So indeed, learning to hear your internal voice and pay attention to it is what will guide you to find the answer that you're looking for, which has been always there.
Right.
So this is the part of the perception and projection. So I think we talked about this already. The obstacle, it's not an issue, it's a learning moment. So when you feel stuck, when you feel that there is nothing to do about it, then we need to start thinking, what do I need? What resources do I need? Do I need to learn something from me? Do I need to learn something for me? Do I need to acquire more resources, emotional resources, financial, whatever it is? There is a learning opportunity. Question: no longer remaining in a victim mentality, rather taking responsibility for a part of what is happening in our surrounding. Crystal, correct. And as an individual, as a clinician, you will want to facilitate that learning process, because remember, our clients don't come with those tools. That's when you begin utilizing the framework and begin exploring with your client to find out, you know, how do I take responsibility? Because you tell me to take responsibility, how? Well, the first step is to be aware of you. What are your secondary motives? What are your emotional response to it? What's happening within you? That's going to provide an empowering process for whoever is feeling as the victim. So let me give you an example. I had a client that was suffering of anxiety. And I'm not suggesting you to practice this. I'm just sharing the case so that you can create an image of how it works. He came to me and say, I suffer of anxiety, and I don't know how that started, right? Through the months that we worked together, I invited my client. This is me once again. I'm not suggesting you to do this. This is me, and once you get fully trained and fully understand NLP, then you can choose to do it if you want to. I invited my client to change the word of anxiety to bodily sensations. Why did I do that? Because my client has been obsessed looking online ways of eliminating anxiety. What other techniques? He tried everything that you could imagine, but refused to utilize medication, although he was prescribed with one. He refused to utilize the psychotropic medication that was given to him and tried everything that you could imagine. Teas, herbs, a therapist, and I was the third therapist that he came to. And he complained it because the therapist just say, so how does it make you feel? Right? The question that continues the narrative process. For him, that was not enough. So what do we do? I invited him at the beginning to change the word anxiety to a bodily sensation. This is how my body feels. So, and I asked him, what if you don't have the word anxiety? Who told you you had anxiety? Well, my doctor. Who else? My counselor. And who else? Well, the videos I have watched said that I have anxiety. So he was absolutely reinforcing the idea that he had anxiety. So imagine, guys, that you have a client that comes and say, I don't want to be anxious, but yet I'm confirming any way possible that I have anxiety.
So just by coming to therapy is reinforcing the idea, right?
Correct. So I said, well, look, you have palpitations, you can't sleep at night, you have difficulties eating. I got you, no problem. So from now on, every time that you say I had an anxiety attack, you will describe what part of your body actually had that. So at the beginning it was challenging because it was a new thing for him. Remember, new thing, we introduce new information, and of course it's going to be filtered. If we think about my client's case, he had already in his mind a preset of values that were going to challenge me, okay? So we worked through those. He asked me, so how do I go to sleep? And I say, great, so, and the sleeping, you know how frustrated you are that you can only sleep 5 hours or 3 hours or whatever the case was in that moment? He said, yes. I don't want you to fight and feel angry because you can't sleep. Because there is one reality. You will not be able to sleep. But if you continue getting mad every time that you cannot sleep, what you're producing is cortisol in your body. You're stressed out and you damage further organs of your body. So why don't we embrace your inability to sleep? So here is me, guys, an individual that is telling a client, what if you forget everything that you know about anxiety? What if you just become a tabula rasa and say, okay, let me see. Maybe if I don't get mad at my inability to sleep and just wake up, take a walk, and practice the grounding techniques. I did teach him grounding techniques. Then maybe something will change. It took us weeks and weeks and weeks, okay? And every session he will come and say, I'm still anxious and not being able to sleep. But this is the magical thing that happened as we continue. This is how he started changing his words. Last night, I was not able, look, the past tense, I was not able to sleep. But then I got up and I say, okay, if I can sleep, I'm just gonna walk outside and then just relax. Then I went to bed again and I slept. So how was that? Well, good, because 3 hours later I was up again and I said, okay, again, let me walk again. So what's happening, he started moving from I'm ill to, wait, maybe if this is gonna be with me, why I not embrace this and make my life less miserable for me and for my family? So as the weeks went on, guys, he stopped using the word anxiety. But this is what happened through the process. He started narrating all the trauma from his life. He started narrating how he became actually the father of the family. He started narrating how he was abused, how he suffered of traumas, how the father left them, etc., etc., etc. So as an individual that came to you and said, I'm anxious, but I don't know why. And then weeks will go by and he started manifesting and telling you, look, it's too heavy for me. The only response that the body had at that point, it's like, you need attention for you. Let me actually activate a way unconsciously. I'm going to activate a way so that you can go back to pay attention to you. So what we ended up doing in the planning, we decided that he was going to do a beautiful activity for him on a weekly basis. So he chose to have a massage on a weekly basis. So what happened is that he started taking care of him without paying too much attention to the extreme need of caring for others. So suddenly, the anxiety went away. He was not able to sleep, but increased the hours of sleeping from 3 hours to 4 hours to 5 hours to 6 hours max top. So this is what you do when you start actually tracking the thought process of an individual. Why are you hating not sleeping if you're not sleeping anymore anyway? You can choose to be angry about it, or you can choose to be okay with it and go back to sleep a couple more hours by being tranquil and to be in peace with you. Your cortisol levels go down if you accept it and you move on, right? So he is fortunately a successful case, and I absolutely love that. So this is just a way of how a challenge and how a particular words that we use at times are reinforcers to continue categorizing individuals. We also need to be aware of that as clinicians and always support the well-being of clients. So remember, an obstacle is always an opportunity for learning. Questions?
There was a comment from Danielle. In the example of domestic violence victim, what if their lack of an answer is due to emotions such as shame, not necessarily that they don't know? I'm going to answer that. I was just using as a broad example, and of course, there could be an inhibition to share because of a negative emotional response. So that could be true, but we don't know. And kind of not really being able to get too deep into how that intervention might work is that we would have to establish enough trust and rapport with the client to them, like as Gerardo mentioned, then you start spontaneously uncovering things that are keeping you from those answers. And it can happen in a variety of ways. I don't know if that answers the question exactly, or maybe you could respond, Gerardo.
And also, Daniel, remember that you are a future clinician. There are basic skills that we can never give for granted. You go back to the reflection, you go back to the summarization, you go back to the rapport building. That is going to provide you a beautiful working alliance with your client. Don't forget, never forget that. When you feel stuck, go back to those basic skills that are necessary.
Active listening.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So indeed, if it is shame, let's work and see how is that happening. What's the purpose of feeling that way? Okay, let's see. So how do we get there? Neurolinguistic. Now I'm going to show you a couple of basic techniques that we utilize in neurolinguistics, so which is probably what everyone is like, what techniques are there? So we have a strategist, we have sensory acuity, we have language. We have talked about language quite a bit in this presentation, so you probably know what it refers to language, right? Rapport. Look, this is extremely important. Rapport. That's our basics in therapeutic alliance. Right? We want to build up that rapport with our clients so that they can, the trust evolve, and then we can challenge them in a very safe environment. The outcomes, we talk about the outcomes as well. Remember, when we plan, We always we want is what they want, not what they don't want instead. So simultaneously, we incorporate language and outcome establishment in terms of, let's not make it a negative, let's do it positive. Because in the advanced neurolinguistic approaches, what we have encountered is that unconsciously we always absorb the negative connotations. That is why we always ask the clients, don't mistreat yourself with words. Just to exemplify, I'm stupid, I'm bored, I'm incompetent, because even though you think you are playing, NLP presupposes that everything gets storage in your unconscious mind. So we want to be always kind to ourselves. So outcomes in a positive modality. I want this. I want to get a romantic relationship. I want to get a job. So how do we get there in a positive terms?
So
right?
just for a quick example on, I know I've been asking a lot of questions and commenting, but so if I were to say, I'm stupid, Gerardo, how could we reframe that into positive outcomes?
Well, say for example, part of the therapy is, I want to eliminate my stupidity in math. Well, how about if we change it to, let's learn new techniques to approach math?
So instead of saying I'm no good at math or I'm stupid at math, or I could say I'm interested in learning new techniques to improve my math skills.
Which in reality, what is happening is that you point to a behavior rather than your persona, right? Your skills in terms of a task, and it's actually a behavior. Mm-hmm. So nobody is born in this universe knowing everything. It just happened that to me, Oscar, I need a little more attention in this particular subject so that I can continue learning. But it doesn't speak of my entire individuality as a persona. It just speaks to the lack of skills that I have in a particular area. So the unconscious mind, at the moment that you call yourself a stupid, encodes that. And because you're stupid, it continues a cycle of perpetuating that. I'm not gonna take that calculus class because let me tell you, Algebra 2 was so hard and I'm stupid. So a limitation is already imposed, not because of external ideas, but because your own filters are already encoded. So that is why it's very important, the language and how we establish outcome in therapy. Submodalities and anchoring. I truly believe that you have experienced those, Oscar, before with me, the anchoring, remember?
Yes.
So we will review some of those. I do want to actually emphasize rapport, because in the NLP world or framework, you know this already because it's the basics of our counseling field. But in the NLP, guys, rapport is everything. Because rapport doesn't start when the individual comes to your office. Rapport starts when they call you and you answer that phone to schedule an appointment. And the rapport in the advanced side of neurolinguistics includes your beliefs about what you are hearing from that client. If you have a client that is crying and you start actually conceptualizing this client as suffering of depression, guess what is going to happen? When she or he comes to your office, he is no longer Maria or Alma or Kim or Crystal, or he is a depressive girl. So, and although you say, well, I don't think of it in that way, you don't have to think in that way. It's already encoded since you talk to this individual. That is why it's extremely important that we need to get to know yourself. How do I limit my clients? How do I conceptualize them? Can they just be? And then when that report starts in the phone call, you also project yourself. You also, when he or she is sitting in front of you, you can see the individual, not the behavior. You can see the entire qualities that he or she is presenting to you. And how do we notice that? How do we notice change? Well, don't we actually notice the posture of the individuals, the facial expressions? Even the change of a skin color can be noticeable. And that's something happening. The voice quality, right? Your very own self voice quality, when you express something, can signify and create a rapport with your client. Imagine that you, and this is something that you learn in our field. Imagine that someone comes to you and said, well, I'm sad. And then you start crying with your client. You project that. Well, yeah, I know you're sad, but I'm here for you to help me right now, for you to cry with me. Nothing wrong with crying, guys. Absolutely not. I'm just saying that let's project that. Let's project your willpower. Let's project the entire belief that they can change. And then let's make it noticeable for them. I can see your face blushing. I can see you're smiling now. It reminded me of a client of mine that came to me. She was 69 and came to me and said, no, my life is a misery. I can't be happy. I don't, nothing, nobody loves me. So totally like I have nothing to do with that. My life is a misery. So throughout the weeks, she started actually, you know, showing the teeth and smiling little by little. Here is me noticing all that and say, oh, your smile is beautiful. When you do that, when you are very attentive of subtle changes, whether it's in linguistics, meaning verbal or not verbal, or physiological response, guess what is happening? You build a rapport, an intense alliance with whoever is in front of you. So a rapport is indeed a technique of NLP. Not only NLP, because we're talking about NLP, but it comes from our field as well. They do extend it a little more, because then we have predicates. In another session, if Oscar invites me, we will talk about those advanced techniques. Breathing location is another advanced technique that you probably already know. You know, where is the breathing, what is happening, so you bring the attention of the client. But those are kind of important aspects of NLP. Building a rapport with your client, manifesting it through the alliance to facilitate the change. Indicators of rapport, color change, what they say, and leading, those are parts. Reframing is probably what we were talking about, the CBT. In reality, you can reframe beliefs in any context that they may be presented. So part of the reframing, we have a comparative deletion. What do I mean by that? These reframing techniques allows you to challenge the individual and compare the context in which that particular idea is being taken part in. So I use a jacket in Alaska because it's cold. What if I use a jacket here in Vegas? What would you say? Will that make me crazy? It is like kind of like the concept of mirroring one another. Correct, correct. Crystal, yes, you're mirroring, correct. So imagine, and indeed, Crystal, thank you for letting me know that, because when a client comes to your office, it's because energetically your client was looking for you already. And you vibrated energetically to the same level of your client. So when someone comes to me, my belief is that they were looking for me and I was looking for them. Indeed, mirroring our efforts to come in.
Mm-hmm. That's a concept that Irv Yalom talks about in his books.
Correct.
Who's a very famous therapist and master clinician.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, he does that. So reframing the context, does it always happen? And in which context that will not happen? Where would you not feel anxious? In what time of the day? Well, every day. Well, yeah, let's be specific. What time? Well, at 12. What's happening at 12? Well, I'm watching a sad movie and then they kill someone and then I feel this way. Well, is this happening every day you're watching the movie? No, but it's often at that time. Well, then you remove that. So what will happen at 2 o'clock? Well, maybe not. Well, how about if you get anxious during those 5 minutes and then move on? You decide which minutes. So reframing, when will this be the case? There are other reframings. This is just an example of a context reframing, but there are other ones. So modalities. So modalities is a technique of the NLP in which I think it was Danielle, were you the one talking about trauma? I can't recall, but someone was talking about trauma. So modalities is part of this treatment process, and it's not precisely the one that we use for the trauma, but I'm giving you an example. The dissociative technique is actually a technique in which under a hypnotic state, you allow the client to bring in the trauma image. The dissociative technique allows you to begin changing aspects of the image, and then you ask the clients how they feel. Let me give you an example. Well, you know, I'm going to give you a life example from one of my clients. She came from Guatemala. The family was murdered by the government during the Civil War. She's 85 and couldn't, she was just devastated and had never been able to process that. So what I did under hypnosis, I asked her to bring in that image of that moment where they were actually decapitating the father. So what happened is that she brought that in, and of course emotions activated immediately. She started crying. So I asked her, is this image happening in your mind as a movie? As in a still picture? How is it? Or what is happening? She said, like a movie. Okay, so is that in color or black and white? No, it's a color. Okay, so does it have a sound? Yes, it's like a close sound to your ear, far. What is it? Well, no, it's very close to me. I can hear it. Okay. So what else is there? Well, the wind is strong. I am actually cold. Okay. What else is happening? Where in your body you're feeling the cold? So after I got that information, and remember, this is under intense emotional state. So what I did, I asked her, so is that a color? She said, yes. I want you to turn that in white and black. Is the movie very close to your eyes? Yes. I want you to farther and put distance between the movie and you. Distance. Okay, I did that. Okay, so the sound, is that too close to your ear? Yes. I want you to get away from the sound. So what we have, we begin. And people will say, well, you are modifying this, the memories. No, I'm inviting the client to see a different perspective and how she added elements of her very own production into a traumatic image that she had with the decapitated dad. The event will never be erased. What we wanted it is to modify aspects of that picture that could be triggers for her. So of course there are a couple of things to follow with the hypnotic process, but that's the dissociative technique. You remove aspects of whatever you want to change to see if that changes the picture, the image in your mind, the schema that you have created of a particular event. That moves on to an anchoring state. Anchoring are a beautiful techniques. It's kind of, if you want to think about tapping, you know, when you tap your body. So what we want, and I'm going to finish with this, Oscar, almost there. What we want is actually, if the individual, for example, it's always sad, you invite the individual to remember an extremely happy moment in your life, right? But look, this is where you project your energy. If the individual is narrating to you the story of a happy moment, and this is a depressive individual, and you want to anchor that beautiful moment, then you get extremely excited with the individual and tap the individual in a particular part of your body, or it could be the ear or the hand, whichever you want. But it's only until you notice a physiological response to that event. Um, some particular ways in which I notice is when I see them smiling with their eye closed, and I'm repeating to them, and are you extremely happy when this happened and your brother is there, and they can actually move the mouth. That's an indication that they are living it, re-experience it. So then I go ahead and tap. Anchoring is tap into the wiring of our body, nervous system. So it has a biological aspect to it, because then the client can always go back and touch the part of the body, and perhaps remembering how it was like going through that. And with that, I think it's a very quick intro of months of training.
Thank you, Gerardo, for that very interesting presentation. And it speaks volumes to the amount of training and time you've put into developing your skills and becoming an effective counselor. And you have a lot of different modalities you use. You're a trained hypnotherapist, and you have had an extensive amount of training, as I mentioned in your bio. Do you guys have any questions before we let Gerardo go? I want to thank him for being here with us today and taking a large part of his time today, this evening, to be our guest speaker and expert panelist. There's a question from Kim. Are there any clients or conditions that NLP may not be effective for?
I will not utilize any of the techniques with psychosis, schizophrenia, because in reality they are not in touch with reality. So if you are seeing someone that it's facing a psychosis or a moment of psychosis, you can actually utilize the prefrontal cortex of the brain in order to access those parts of the brain necessary to conceptualize differently. I mean, if they're taking the medication and they are regulated, why not?
Sure.
Yeah, for sure, but not in the active moment. Other than that, it has been useful for me in most of the cases I have. But remember, you are not only training these guys, you are training multiple ways of helping people. So use the best that works for your client. You know your client better than I am. So
yeah. So Gerardo is expressing this idea that as a clinician, you have to be empowered. You have to not be afraid to work with your client. And sometimes training takes that route where they'll try to terrify you and say, oh, you should never do this, you should never do that. You do what's right and indicated for the client based upon your training, experience, and the wisdom you develop from that. And it takes a long time to get there. It takes time, but it's possible. And I hope you guys all.
Well, thank you, Oscar, for inviting me. Thank you, everyone. It has been my pleasure. I'm very excited always to share what we know and continue to work on it.
Yeah, that was a really interesting and very informative thing. Thanks again, Gerardo, for being here. I'm going to stay on a little longer for the group if you have any other questions after Gerardo makes his exit.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us tonight. All right, folks. Thank you guys, everyone, for all the thank yous to him. I'll give him a call tomorrow and let him know. I think they really like to hear their gratitude because it is a big part of their professional life to have gotten to this level. And I hope this topic has piqued your interest in other approaches. We cover basic approaches and theories in our associate's program and some more advanced ones in the bachelor's program. But of course, Gerardo is at a master's level clinician, and also he's even further doing research in his PhD program. So there's a lot to learn, lots to digest. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I want to start on time and end on time, but if anybody has any last-minute questions, I want to make sure everyone's doing well. If you have any issues or concerns, we're almost at the end of the semester, a couple weeks to go, and Hope you're all getting boned up for final exams and reviewing the chapters and the course work to prepare you for your final exams. If there's any issues or concerns, please contact me. I want you to know I'm here to support you. I know it's been a rough semester with everything that's been going on, but you're not alone in it. So let me know how I can help you and support you. Otherwise, I really wish everybody a good end of the semester. And for those that are graduating, we'll be mailing your diplomas to you, and then we'll definitely celebrate at another time when things have when we have the opportunity to do that. So I sent you an email for the final exam. Okay, I'll check it out. Thanks, guys. Everyone have a great night.